Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The morning Marilyn Curtis arrived, I could feel the tension seep into the office like a slow creeping chill. There was something about her, an aura of control, sharp and unforgiving. I was at my desk, as usual, half buried in routine paperwork, pretending the storm brewing at the entrance had nothing to do with me. She walked in with a kind of confidence that made everyone stop what they were doing, even if just for a second. Her tailored suit, impeccable posture, and sharp eyes scanned the room, as if she were measuring the worth of every person here. When her gaze landed on me, I kept my head down, pretending to read the file in front of me. I knew better than to draw attention, at least not yet. "Julian, right?" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of the office. I looked up to see her standing by my desk, holding a stack of papers with a condescending smirk. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Good. I need you to handle these." She dropped the files onto my desk, her eyes scanning my worn-out tie and creased shirt with thinly veiled disdain. "Simple tasks, perfect for someone with your background." I took the papers, feeling the weight of her words more than the files themselves. She didn't know who I was, not really. To her, I was just another employee, someone to boss around. What she didn't realize was that I owned this place, well, 91% of it. But that wasn't something I flaunted. Let people assume what they wanted. Of course, I said, my voice steady as I placed the files on the corner of my desk. She didn't wait for a response, turning on her heel and walking away, her designer heels clicking against the floor with each step. I watched her retreat to her office, already decorated with framed diplomas and achievements, as if she'd won the place over before even getting her hands dirty. The office buzzed with nervous energy as she passed by, everyone glancing at each other, unsure what to make of the new head of the department. Sarah, the receptionist, leaned over her desk as I passed by on my way to the break room. "She's something, huh?" she whispered, wide-eyed. "Yeah," I muttered, grabbing a cup of coffee, though it was more out of habit than need. "She's going to make things interesting." Sarah nodded, looking relieved someone else had noticed. "I heard she's already got James from accounting in tears." I chuckled quietly, though the humor didn't reach my eyes. Wouldn't surprise me. Marilyn Curtis was a force of nature, but I wasn't worried. People like her always burned bright and fast. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just an employee here. I was the storm she'd never see coming. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Marilyn stormed into the office, her heels tapping like gunfire on the polished floor. I had just settled into my chair, reviewing some client reports, when the door to my cubicle flew open. "Julian." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of the office like a knife. She slapped a document down on my desk, eyes blazing with accusation. "Care to explain this?" I blinked at the paper in front of me, confused. The document was an email, addressed to one of our biggest clients, and it wasn't pretty. Complaints about poor service, damaged goods, and a clear message that the client intended to terminate their contract. "I don't understand," I said, picking up the paper, my brows furrowed. "I didn't send this." Marilyn's arms crossed, her lips twisted into a smirk. "Of course you didn't," she said sarcastically. "Because someone like you couldn't possibly handle a task this important. But guess what? The email came from your workstation." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just an accusation. It was an outright attempt to sabotage me. I knew I hadn't written that email. I ever would have. But here it was, printed in black and white, tied to my name. "I would never send something like this," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "There's been a mistake." "A mistake?" Marilyn's laugh was cold, almost mocking. "You made one too many, Julian. First, your work ethic, now this. Honestly, it's embarrassing." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared by the doorway, her eyes darting between us nervously. "Is everything all right here?" she asked cautiously. "No," Marilyn snapped, waving the paper in her hand. "Julian here seems to think he's above responsibility." I glanced at Sarah, grateful for her presence. "Sarah, I didn't send this email," I said firmly. "Someone must have used my account." Marilyn scoffed, stepping closer. "Blaming others now? How predictable." I stared at her, knowing this wasn't about the email, it was about power. She wanted to humiliate me, make an example of me in front of the office, but she didn't know who she was dealing with, not yet. "I'll get to the bottom of this," I said, my voice calm but cold. "But I promise you, Marilyn, the truth will come out." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned on her heel and left, the storm following in her wake. As the door swung shut, I let out a slow breath. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The air in the conference room felt thick as I entered the space, the atmosphere charged with the buzz of the upcoming shareholder meeting. Marilyn was already there, standing near the window, her arms crossed as she exchanged pleasantries with a few other executives. She didn't notice me at first, but when she did, her eyes narrowed in that familiar way, lips curving into a smirk. I made my way to a seat near the back, unnoticed as always. It was better this way for now. As the meeting was about to begin, Marilyn's eyes locked onto mine. Her expression was one of incredulity, as if she couldn't fathom why someone like me would even be here. She marched over, her heels echoing loudly in the now silent room. "What do you think you're doing here, Julian?" she hissed under her breath. "This meeting is for senior management and shareholders, not lowly employees." I looked up at her, keeping my voice steady. I was invited. Marilyn scoffed, leaning closer. "You don't belong here," she whispered. "Get out before you embarrass yourself." The tension in the room was palpable, but I held my ground. The meeting was about to start, and soon the truth would come out. Before she could continue her tirade, the doors opened, and the president of the company walked in, followed by the other board members. As the president took his place at the head of the table, his eyes scanned the room and landed on Marilyn, who quickly straightened up, assuming her usual polished demeanor. The meeting commenced with the usual formalities, reports on profits, projections for the next quarter, the typical corporate banter. But I knew what was coming, and as the conversation turned toward shareholders, my moment arrived. The president cleared his throat, looking down at a document in front of him. "Before we proceed, I'd like to address something important," he began, his voice calm but authoritative. "I've been informed that there's been some confusion regarding the ownership structure of the company." Marilyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat, shooting me a sideways glance. "You see," the president continued, his gaze settling on me, "we have a special controlling shareholder in our midst." Marilyn's eyes flickered with confusion, her smug expression faltering. "The majority of our company's shares, 91% to be exact, are held by none other than Julian Ball." There was a collective gasp in the room. Marilyn went pale, her face frozen in shock as she turned to look at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I remained seated, calm and collected. The president gestured toward me, his expression serious. "Julian is not just an employee here. He's the one with the true authority, a fact I've personally known for years." Marilyn staggered back, barely able to keep her composure. This can't be true," she stammered, her voice shaking. "He's just a lowly employee," I interrupted, finally standing up. "Not quite. I've been watching, observing, and waiting. But now the truth is out, Marilyn." Her face turned crimson, and for the first time since I'd met her, she was utterly speechless. "You treated me and others poorly because you didn't know who I was. But now you'll have to face the consequences," I said, locking eyes with her. Marilyn's fall from grace had begun. The morning after the revelation was quiet, but it felt like the calm before a storm. The shareholder meeting had shaken the office to its core. Whispers followed me through the halls. People who had known me for years suddenly couldn't meet my eyes, their glances filled with confusion and awe. The weight of my secret was gone, but its exposure brought new tension. At noon, the president called for an emergency meeting in his office. Marilyn and I were both summoned, and I knew exactly why. As I walked toward the president's office, I saw Marilyn ahead of me, her usually confident steps slower, more hesitant. She didn't greet me as we reached the door at the same time. For the first time since I'd known her, Marilyn Curtis was unsure of herself. We entered the president's office. He sat behind his large mahogany desk, his hands folded, his expression grim. His silence was thick with disappointment, as though he was wrestling with the gravity of the situation. "Sit down," he ordered, his voice measured. We both obeyed. Marilyn shifted in her seat, still not looking at me. I glanced at her for a moment, noticing how her composed exterior seemed on the verge of cracking. "You both made this company your life," the president began, his eyes moving between the two of us. "But what happened yesterday has changed everything." Marilyn's composure slipped further, and she finally spoke, her voice quiet but tinged with desperation. "Mr. Williams, I've enough," the president interrupted sharply, raising his hand. "I've heard enough excuses from you, Marilyn. The damage you caused over the last few months cannot be undone with words." Marilyn's eyes widened and her lips trembled. "But I didn't know who Julian was," she stammered. "If I had known." "That's exactly the problem, Marilyn," I interjected calmly. "It shouldn't matter who I am. You treated everyone beneath you with disdain." The president nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Julian's right. The fact that you didn't know his position is irrelevant. It doesn't excuse your behavior. This company prides itself on respect and collaboration, values you've undermined with your arrogance. Marilyn clenched her hands together, her voice growing more frantic. Please, I can change. I was under pressure to perform, and I… Stop, the president's voice was stern. You crossed too many lines, Marilyn. It's not just about your attitude toward Julian. The accusations against you regarding client mishandling and employee harassment are serious. She turned toward me, her eyes pleading. Julian, you understand, don't you? We've all made mistakes. Surely with your influence, we can work something out. I met her gaze steadily, the memory of months of belittlement and manipulation playing in my mind. This isn't about mistakes, Marilyn. It's about accountability. Her face fell, and she slumped back into her chair, defeated. The president sighed heavily and turned toward her. Marilyn Curtis, your actions have left me no choice. Effective immediately, you are dismissed from your position. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Marilyn's face drained of color as reality sunk in. She didn't say another word. The meeting was over, and so was her reign of terror. The tension in the air had dissipated, but the silence that followed was unnerving. Marilyn sat frozen in her chair, staring blankly ahead as if the president's words hadn't yet registered. I watched her, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. She had dug her own grave, but the fall from grace was always brutal to witness. The president stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You have until the end of the day to gather your things, Marilyn. Security will escort you out. Marilyn finally blinked, her hands trembling, as she gripped the armrests of her chair. This can't be happening, she muttered under her breath. Her voice was barely a whisper, like she was speaking more to herself than anyone in the room. She turned toward me, desperation flashing in her eyes. Julian, please, she begged, her voice cracking. You know I didn't mean for things to go this far. I was trying to prove myself. I was under pressure to perform. You can understand that, can't you? I held her gaze for a moment, considering her words. Months ago, I might have believed her, might have sympathized with her struggle. But now the damage was too deep. I understand pressure, I replied evenly, but I don't understand cruelty. Her face fell, and for the first time, she had no sharp retort, no defense, just silence. The president cleared his throat, standing up from behind his desk. That's enough, he said firmly, glancing between us. Marilyn, you made your choices, and now you must face the consequences. There's nothing more to say. Marilyn looked like she might protest, but the president's expression left no room for argument. She stood shakily, her hands still trembling, and nodded once. Fine, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll leave. As she turned to leave, the door creaked open. The sound echoed in the room, a fitting punctuation to the moment. Marilyn hesitated at the threshold, then glanced over her shoulder at me one last time. The arrogance that had once defined her was gone, replaced by something more fragile, something broken. I said nothing, only watching as she walked out the door, the weight of her defeat hanging heavy in the air. The president sighed once more, rubbing his temples. I never thought it would come to this, he admitted quietly, but it had to be done. I nodded in agreement. It was overdue. He glanced at me with a weary smile. Julian, you handled this situation with more grace than most would have. I'm proud of you. I didn't respond immediately, unsure how to process everything that had just happened. Thank you, I finally said. But it's time to move forward now. For everyone. The president nodded, his expression softening. Indeed. And with you in the position you're in, I'm confident the company will thrive. As I walked out of his office, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of closure. Marilyn was gone, and with her, the dark cloud that had hung over the office for so long. The fall had been inevitable, and now the company could finally breathe again.